10 biggest idiots in Hollywood's golden age history. These weren't actors who made poor choices. These were stars who had everything: fame, fortune, adoration from millions, and threw it all away through staggering ego, self-sabotage, and decisions so idiotic they still baffle industry historians today. We're talking about performers who turned down career-defining roles, alienated every colleague within reach, chose drugs over dynasties, and self-destructed with such consistency it seemed almost intentional. Hollywood's golden age produced some of cinema's greatest talents, but it also created cautionary tales: actors who couldn't handle success, stars whose egos eclipsed their judgment, and performers who made decisions so baffling that decades later we're still trying to understand what they were thinking. Behind the glamour and glory were people capable of spectacular stupidity. Drop a comment and let me know which idiotic decision shocked you the most. Let's start with number 10. Number 10. George Lazenby. George Lazenby had never acted before in his life when he landed the role of James Bond in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. The Australian model walked into an audition in 1968, lied about his experience, and somehow convinced producers he was the right man to replace Sean Connery. Against all odds, he got the part. The film released in 1969 and received strong reviews. Today, it's considered one of the best Bond films ever made. But Lazenby made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. His agent convinced him that spy movies were finished, that the genre was dying. Lazenby believed him. He turned down a 7-film contract worth millions of dollars. He refused to shave his beard for promotional duties, deliberately alienating the producers. He walked away from guaranteed superstardom after just one film. Sean Connery returned for one more Bond film, then Roger Moore took over the role and starred in 7 successful Bond movies spanning 12 years. George Lazenby spent the next decades doing B-movies and car commercials in Australia, one of the most short-sighted career decisions in film history. He walked away from guaranteed superstardom and financial security because he listened to terrible advice and believed his own hype. Number 9. Veronica Lake. Veronica Lake had everything a 1940s movie star could want. Her signature peekaboo hairstyle became iconic. Her sultry screen presence in Sullivan's Travels and This Gun for Hire made her a film noir legend. But behind the glamorous image was a woman who let ego and alcoholism destroy everything she'd built. Lake was impossible to work with. She showed up late to set, often drunk. She fought with directors and co-stars constantly. Her behavior became so notorious that even her famous hairstyle caused problems. During World War II, women working in factories started copying her look, and their hair got caught in machinery. When Lake was asked to change her signature style for the war effort, she reluctantly complied but deeply resented it. As she aged, she refused to accept smaller roles. She demanded only leading lady parts even as the offers dried up. Paramount dropped her contract in 1948 when she was just 26 years old. By 1952, she was broke and working menial jobs. In 1962, a photographer found her working as a bartender in a New York hotel. The photo made international headlines: America's former screen goddess serving drinks to survive. She died in 1973 at age 50 from hepatitis and acute kidney injury, both caused by decades of alcoholism. Veronica Lake had the looks, the talent, and the roles. She threw it all away because she couldn't control her drinking or her attitude. Number 8. Tony Curtis. Tony Curtis was born Bernard Schwartz in the Bronx, the son of Hungarian immigrants. He transformed himself into a Hollywood leading man through sheer determination, landing roles in classics like Some Like It Hot and Sweet Smell of Success. His matinee idol looks made him a star, but beneath the handsome exterior was a man who never took his craft seriously. Director Billy Wilder once said he had to pull Curtis's performance out of him frame by frame. In a 1960 interview, Curtis admitted he never read scripts all the way through. He once referred to Laurence Olivier, one of the greatest actors of all time, as that English guy who yells a lot. Curtis passed on serious dramatic roles that could have established him as a legitimate actor, choosing instead to star in vanity projects that showcased his looks but nothing else. His personal life was equally impulsive. He married 6 times, often after whirlwind romances that barely lasted months. Despite earning millions during his career, he made poor financial decisions and spent lavishly without any planning for the future. His later years were marked by bitterness and resentment about not being taken seriously as an actor. Tony Curtis had raw talent and undeniable charm, but he lacked the discipline or introspection to harness it for lasting greatness. He remains a cautionary tale of beauty without depth. Number 7. Maureen O'Hara. On screen, Maureen O'Hara played strong women who put men in their place. The fiery redhead became famous for her performances opposite John Wayne in The Quiet Man and other classics. She was known as the Queen of Technicolor, celebrated for her beauty and her fierce Irish spirit. But off-screen, O'Hara made idiotic decisions with men that she herself later couldn't explain. In 1939, at age 19, she went on dates with George Brown that she didn't even want to go on. She agreed only to avoid upsetting a friend who had set them up. On the day she was leaving for America, Brown called her repeatedly, begging to see her one last time. Against her better judgment, she agreed. When she arrived at the address he'd given her, she found Brown standing with a minister, ready to perform a marriage ceremony. Instead of walking out, she went through with it. She later described her intellect separating from the rest of her body as she numbly said her vows. The marriage was never consummated and was annulled in 1941. Then she immediately made the same mistake. That same year, she married Will Price, a dialogue director she'd met on set. Price turned out to be a brutal drunk. He punched her in the belly while she was pregnant. He smashed her antique doll collection. He plundered the fortune she'd made from her films. Yet she stayed with him for years, unable to leave despite the abuse. The turmoil in her personal life even cost her career opportunities. She turned down the lead role in The Paleface in 1948 because she was going through such a turbulent period that she didn't think she could laugh every day on set. She later called it a terrible mistake. Years later, O'Hara reflected on her choices with brutal honesty. She said she was a stupid ass to marry Will. She admitted she still didn't fully understand the decisions she'd made, asking herself how she could have made the same mistake again. Maureen O'Hara was a brilliant actress who played strong women on screen, but repeatedly crumbled when it came to men in real life. Proof that intelligence doesn't prevent idiotic choices. Number 6. Clara Bow. Clara Bow was the original It Girl, the actress who defined the flapper era and became the biggest female star of the late 1920s. She rose from extreme poverty in Brooklyn to become the top box office draw by 1928. Her personal life was as wild as her screen persona. She had affairs with multiple co-stars, was rumored to have slept with the entire USC football team, and gambled heavily. In 1930, her secretary Daisy DeVoe started stealing money from her. When Clara discovered the theft, DeVoe threatened to reveal all of Clara's personal secrets unless she was paid off. This was the moment that would define Clara Bow's downfall. She should have fired DeVoe immediately and faced whatever scandal came. Instead, she paid. DeVoe kept demanding more money. Clara kept paying. Then DeVoe sold the stories to tabloids anyway. The 1931 trial became a media circus. Lurid details of Clara's sex life were broadcast nationwide. Newspapers printed every salacious detail. Clara's mental health, already fragile from undiagnosed bipolar disorder, completely collapsed. She couldn't handle the stress and scrutiny. In 1933, at just 28 years old and at the height of her earning potential, she retired from film. She spent her final decades in and out of psychiatric care, isolated from Hollywood and the world that had once adored her. Clara Bow died in 1965 at age 60 from a heart attack. She could have weathered the scandal if she'd faced it head-on. Instead, paying blackmail made everything exponentially worse and destroyed her mentally. One idiotic decision to pay rather than fight turned a manageable problem into a complete catastrophe. Number 5. Kirk Douglas. Kirk Douglas was born Isser Danielovich, the son of Russian Jewish immigrants. He transformed himself into one of Hollywood's greatest actors through sheer force of will, starring in classics like Spartacus and Paths of Glory. His talent was undeniable. His chin dimple became iconic, but his massive ego and need for control alienated nearly everyone who worked with him. Douglas was notorious for being difficult on set. He had to control everything. During the filming of Spartacus in 1960, he clashed so intensely with director Stanley Kubrick that he eventually fired him and took over production himself. The move created lifelong animosity between two Hollywood legends. In his autobiography, Douglas bragged about having affairs with virtually every leading lady he worked with. He seemed proud of his conquests, never considering how it made him look. Despite his wealth, he was notoriously cheap. Stories circulated about him refusing to tip servers or pay for dinners with friends. His son Michael Douglas later spoke publicly about their strained relationship, describing his father's emotional unavailability. Kirk refused to acknowledge his illegitimate son until pressured by media attention years later. His need to be the toughest, most dominant man in every room cost him friendships and professional relationships. Despite his immense talent, Many colleagues simply refused to work with him after one film. The idiocy wasn't a single decision. It was a lifetime of choosing ego over human connection. He could have been beloved like his contemporary James Stewart. Instead, he was feared and resented. Kirk Douglas died in 2020 at age 103. His immense talent forever overshadowed by an ego so large it pushed away nearly everyone around him. He proved you can be both a legend and insufferable. Number 4. Marlene Dietrich. Marlene Dietrich captivated audiences in The Blue Angel in Morocco, becoming a symbol of sultry sophistication in 1930s Hollywood. The German-born actress worked with director Josef von Sternberg, who crafted her entire image as a mysterious, untouchable woman. But Dietrich became so obsessed with controlling that image, with playing manipulative games, that she sabotaged her own longevity. Paramount records from the 1930s reveal that Dietrich would pretend not to understand English during contract disputes, even though she was fluent. She would feign ignorance about business matters in public, then maneuver privately behind the scenes. Her letters, now preserved in the Berlin State Library, reveal a razor-sharp mind. But she deliberately refused to show her intelligence publicly. She once told a journalist that men are frightened of smart women, that they prefer a whisper to a sentence. So she played dumb. This calculated naivety came at a tremendous cost. When the studio system weakened in the 1950s, Dietrich had no fallback. Unlike Bette Davis or Katharine Hepburn, who had cultivated themselves as producers, directors, and businesswomen, Dietrich had deliberately limited herself to being a beautiful mystery. She spent her later years touring as a singer, draped in sequins, performing old standards. But the film world had moved on without her. She became increasingly reclusive and bitter. After age 65, she refused to be photographed. She spent the last 11 years of her life as a recluse in her Paris apartment, refusing all visitors. She died there in 1992, at age 90. Marlene Dietrich wasn't dumb, but she allowed herself to be underestimated for so long that she limited her own legacy. She played the long game but forfeited her full potential to maintain a beautiful mask. The idiocy was in deliberately caging herself in a mystique that eventually became a prison. Number 3. George Raft. George Raft was born in Hell's Kitchen and grew up with real connections to organized crime. Those connections helped him land early roles playing tough guys in 1930s gangster films. He could dance, throw a punch, and wear a fedora like he was born in one. He had everything he needed to become a legend. Then he made the worst series of career choices in Hollywood history. According to Louis Yablonsky's biography, Raft rarely read scripts in full. He selected roles based on how tough the guy looked, nothing more. In 1941, he was offered the lead role in The Maltese Falcon. He turned it down. Humphrey Bogart took the role and became a star. In 1942, he was offered the lead in Casablanca. He rejected it, calling it a weird little war picture. Bogart took that role too and cemented his legendary status. In 1944, Raft was offered Double Indemnity. He passed on it because he was uncomfortable with the moral ambiguity of the character. All 3 films became classics. All 3 elevated their lead actors to immortality. George Raft could have starred in any of them. A Warner Brothers memo from 1942 described Raft as consistently uncooperative and alarmingly short-sighted, but he didn't change. He maintained close friendships with mobsters like Bugsy Siegel and Frank Costello. He gambled away his money at underground casinos. When people questioned his choices, he shrugged and said he went with what he knew. By the 1960s, Raft was making cameos in second-rate films, his early promise completely eclipsed by the actors who had taken the roles he'd dismissed. He died in 1980 at age 85 from leukemia. George Raft isn't forgotten because of what he did. He's forgotten because of everything he refused to do. He had 3 separate chances at immortality and turned them all down. Number 2. Frances Farmer. Frances Farmer signed with Paramount in 1936 and appeared in Come and Get It to critical acclaim. She was a talented actress who could have been one of the greats, but her rebellious attitude, alcoholism, and complete refusal to play Hollywood's game led to one of the most tragic endings in Golden Age history. Farmer was outspoken about her leftist politics. As a teenager, she'd written an essay titled God Dies and won a trip to the USSR. This was during the Red Scare era. She could not have picked a worse time to be openly communist. She constantly fought with studio executives and refused all publicity demands. She wouldn't smile for cameras, she wouldn't do interviews, she wouldn't pretend to be anything other than exactly what she was. She drank heavily and got into public fights. She was arrested multiple times for drunk driving. The idiocy was her refusal to compromise on anything, even basic professionalism. She didn't need to abandon her values. She just needed to show up sober and on time. She couldn't even do that. In January 1943, she was arrested for drunk driving and violated her parole. She was sentenced to jail. Her mother had her declared mentally incompetent and committed to Western State Hospital. Farmer spent years in brutal psychiatric institutions from 1944 to 1950. She underwent insulin shock therapy and possibly a transorbital lobotomy, though historians still dispute this. When she was released in 1950, she attempted a comeback, but the spark was gone. She worked as a hotel clerk in Indianapolis, unrecognized by the public that had once known her face. Frances Farmer died in 1970 at age 56 from esophageal cancer. Her story is more tragic than idiotic, but her complete unwillingness to compromise on anything, even basic professional behavior, accelerated a catastrophe that could have been prevented. A little flexibility, a little common sense, could have saved her career and her life. Number 1. Bobby Driscoll. Bobby Driscoll was discovered at age 5 in a barber shop in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. His father was getting his hair cut when a talent scout approached them. Bobby signed with Disney in 1943 and became the studio's first child star. He appeared in Song of the South, starred in Treasure Island and The Window. In 1950, at age 12, he won a special Juvenile Academy Award. The audience gave him a standing ovation. His future seemed limitless. In 1953, he voiced Peter Pan, the boy who never grew up. It should have been the role that cemented his legacy as Disney royalty. Then puberty hit. Bobby developed severe acne. He gained weight. His voice changed. He went through an awkward phase like every teenager does. Disney dropped his contract with barely an explanation. No transition plan. No support system. He was 16 years old, had been working since age 5, and was suddenly unemployed. He tried to transition to adult roles, but nobody wanted him. He was too closely associated with Disney. By 17, he was working odd jobs and dealing with massive rejection and an identity crisis. This is where the idiotic decisions began. Bobby started using heroin at 17 to cope with his depression. He was arrested multiple times in the late 1950s for drug possession. He tried to restart his career, but he was unreliable because of his addiction. He burned every bridge he had left. In 1965, he moved to New York City. He lived in Greenwich Village and tried to make it as an artist. He became increasingly isolated. He was homeless. He was deep in addiction. He had no contact with his family, no contact with Disney, no contact with anyone from his past. On March 30, 1968, Bobby Driscoll was found dead in an abandoned tenement building in the East Village. His body had been there for weeks. There was no identification on him. He was buried in an unmarked pauper's grave on Hart Island, New York's Potter's Field for unclaimed bodies. His mother filed a missing person report but had no idea he was already dead. It wasn't until 1969, over a year later, that fingerprints finally identified him. Disney never reached out during his decline. They never helped. They acted like he'd never existed. The idiocy operates on multiple levels here. Yes, Disney failed him catastrophically, but Bobby made choices too. He turned to drugs instead of seeking help. He isolated himself from every support system. He severed all family ties. If he'd gotten addiction treatment, if he'd maintained connections with his family, if there had been any financial planning from his child star earnings, any of these things could have changed his trajectory. Bobby Driscoll died at 31 from heart failure related to advanced atherosclerosis caused by prolonged drug use. He went from voicing Peter Pan, the boy who never grew up, to dying alone and unidentified in an abandoned building, buried in a mass grave. His story represents everything wrong with Hollywood's treatment of child stars. A gifted child destroyed by an industry that viewed him as disposable the moment he stopped looking like a perfect Disney kid. So there you have it. 10 stars who had everything Hollywood could offer and managed to throw it away through ego, poor judgment, addiction, and decisions that still defy logic. Some made one catastrophically stupid choice that haunted them forever. Others made the same mistakes repeatedly until there was nothing left. What connects them all is this: fame and fortune mean nothing without wisdom, humility, and the ability to adapt when circumstances change. Hollywood's golden age was filled with extraordinary talent, but it was also littered with extraordinary waste. Which story shocked you most? Do you think any of these actors deserved a second chance they never got? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this deep dive into Hollywood's golden age fascinating, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories from cinema's most dramatic era. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.